Testing 1 2 3. Hello.
Testing 1 2 3. Hello.
Hi. Hello. Hello, everyone. This is your Purple Friends. I'm Joe.
And I'm Co.
Welcome.
Welcome, indeed. It's nice to be back.
It is very nice to be back. It's been a struggle to get back to the
old recording studio.
Yeah.
Purple Friends, you don't know this. We try to record this show pretty far in advance. And this one we are recording by the skin of our teeth. I'm hoping that it will still come up on time.
We're recording on Valentine's Day, so that should give you some context.
Yeah, so I have the weekend to get this going by 5 a.m. on Monday.
You got this.
I got this. It's no problem.
Anyway, I'm very grateful for you.
Oh.
And being such a quick editor, and I believe in you, and I'm very grateful for you.
Oh, is that your little grateful?
That is my little grateful.
Your grateful? Little grateful is for me?
Yes.
Wow.
I can do that.
Yeah, I guess you can. There's no rules.
And I haven't done it, so there you go.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so I've already done the podcast, and you've already done me. So whoever's keeping track of this.
We have to get more creative, is what you're saying.
Oh, I have a good one. Well, I did. I lost it. No, I got it. Here's what I'm so grateful for. The Pokemon trading card game Pocket. I am spending so much time on that game.
I love that. I love that for you. I love that for gaming people.
Yeah, it's literally just a mobile app for collecting Pokemon cards and battling people with the Pokemon card game. It's very lightweight. Mm-hmm. I enjoy it. You can get a lot out of it before you pay a single cent, and I love that in a mobile game.
Yes.
So that's great. And that's my little grateful. This is not a sponsorship. I'm so embarrassed. It always turns into a brand sponsorship.
Well, we can't help but be big fans of stuff.
Fans, brands, some of them.
Fans of brands.
Yeah, that's true. But what are we not a fan of?
Narcissist. Get him out of here.
Oh, no. If you're a narcissist, this podcast may be very hard to sit through. But if you're not a narcissist, I hope you don't feel attacked right now, because we're not talking about you.
Absolutely. But we are talking about narcissism today.
And if you're sitting there right now and you're thinking like, do they mean me? We might mean you. Like that right there is a subtle indicator that we may be talking about you if you think that we are talking about you specifically.
We just ask that you keep an open mind. This is a good time to reflect on both our own actions and maybe the actions of those around us, and how they impact us, right? And so today we'll dive in a little deeper to both what narcissism is, some red flags, and hopefully some productive ways to manage all of that.
Yes, and we're both gonna try really hard not to just like be really mean to narcissists the whole time.
I mean,
but we are going to be very frank about narcissists, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a good word for it, is frank. Because like, I think for in some instances, asterisks. In some instances,
asterisk. Sorry, I wanted to get in there for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's not intentional.
Right.
The manipulation, I mean.
Sure.
The manipulation, the harm, the trauma isn't always intentional. I mean, I do think that a large part of narcissism is learned behavior. But we'll get into that. You know, maybe we should start with something a little bit more basic, right?
Yeah. Let's back up. Super basic. When we say narcissism, we're talking about narcissistic personality disorder.
Yes.
So not just like narcissistic traits. We're talking about the disordered version here that we do a lot on this show.
I love that you said that, because there is a huge difference, right? Mm-hmm. Like, narcissistic personality disorder is a diagnosable disorder. We'll talk about the characteristics in just a second. But that doesn't mean that someone might not, what the heck is the word?
Diagnose?
No, might not like exude.
Oh, like exhibit the...
Thank you. Exhibit narcissistic traits. And narcissistic traits do exist on a spectrum, like basically everything. Yeah. There is like a severity of narcissistic traits. So you might know someone who doesn't have a formal diagnosis, but maybe you can identify as having high or severe narcissistic traits.
Sure.
So keep that in mind, that like, honestly, it's very rare for a narcissist to get diagnosed actually, because you would not find a narcissist in a therapy office. That requires an element of self-reflection, potentially open to empathy, which are all struggles. So like, you do have to get yourself into a therapy office to get diagnosed.
I have actually heard that narcissism is one of the very few things, like one of the very few like brain sort of thingies, that it is not a good idea for you to seek therapy if you're a narcissist. Or am I thinking of something else? Maybe I'm thinking of a sociopath or a psychopath.
That sounds vaguely familiar, but I don't want to speak on it because I don't know.
See, that's why you're here, because you say the qualified expert stuff. Again, the master, the expert.
Yeah. Like, because like part of that, like, part of me is like, yeah, that sounds right. But then another part of me, yeah, exactly. The other part of me is like, hold up.
That's pretty extreme. Maybe I won't put my name on that one.
But why don't you tell us the clinical definition?
Sure, I would love to.
Straight from the DSM-5, y'all.
Hey, narcissistic personality disorder is a mental health condition characterized by an inflated sense of self-importance, a need for admiration, and a lack of empathy.
There you go. A lack of empathy.
Yeah, a need for admiration.
Yes. I did want to specify lack of empathy, not unable to empathize.
Oh,
right?
I see. Okay.
It is, again, just a general lack of, though. Like, it's pretty rough to get a narcissist to even practice empathizing.
Right.
But yeah, you mentioned the need for admiration. And that's absolutely correct, right? Like this idea of grandeur, like an
exceptionalism kind of.
Yes, like a preoccupation with their own exceptionalism, with their own perception of success, of beauty, of whatever else.
I gotcha.
Yes. So yeah, we did talk about how don't get hung up on the whether or not someone is diagnosed.
Yeah.
But whether or not someone is exhibiting narcissistic traits.
This is like you said, it's on a spectrum.
And so part of that spectrum, right, might be someone who is showing some sense of self-importance, self-centeredness, being a little bit vain. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're a narcissist. I do think, especially now in the world of TikTok and social media, like...
Yeah, it seems like vanity is a very common human trait these days. I mean, not to like an extreme, like scary way.
Well, like no, I do think it is...
maybe to a little scary way.
But like, I do think it's also all too common to mislabel. And so I do think the label of like, oh, they're a narcissist, he's a narcissist. Yeah, he's a narcissist. They're a narcissist. Like it's just so it happens all too often, you know. So like
those like
OCD, yeah,
terms.
Like you might have ADHD if
there's the community raised by narcissists online.
Yes. So like I'm sure we've all come across like that, right?
Even I have been one of those people who's been like, I wonder if this person is a narcissist, and that's maybe why we can't seem to connect.
So yeah, those are some preconceived like some misconceptions of like narcissism, right? Is that like obviously it's not just like this sense of self-importance and self-centeredness. It goes a little deeper than that with like the lack of empathy or just difficulty getting there. So
yeah, like crucially, it's not like just being confident, and it's not just
absolutely.
Yeah, it's not just being vain.
Because confidence is a good thing. Yeah, like you want to be confident. Like, and it's I think we can all kind of sniff it out too. Like we're like, oh, that person's got swag, or like they seem confident. Like, oh, they're really feeling themselves. Versus like someone who it just gives a different vibe, right? And you're like, oh, this is kind of a put off, or like I'm turned off by this, or like it's a little too much, or like, okay. And like it gives a different feel.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Should we get into maybe some relevant research?
I would love to get into some relevant research. The first one that I've got here is this research from 2007, Donald Dutton. Yes, Donald Dutton. Research explored the link between narcissistic traits and intimate partner violence. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of ties in with like that lack of empathy piece, right? It kind of does increase some of those traits of both manipulation and, I mean, that avenue is just a little bit closer linked, right? Mm-hmm. So like the gap isn't that far to bridge. So you do see higher levels of intimate partner violence amongst these populations. There's definitely a correlation.
It's kind of easy to see how like, you know, you're in a relationship, like you're a very intimate relationship, obviously, with somebody, and they're like predisposed to be like manipulative. It's a very, very scary situation.
It definitely can be. And again, like a lot of this is, and once we get to like some of the red flags and what that does to the victim in terms of like some symptoms, like it really messes with your sense of reality, with your sense of self, that like seeking help or getting help or leaving or whatever, like just feels so much more daunting because the road to get there feels so much more confusing. So like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about like what some of those red flags look like.
We'll come back to those obstacles too, like the fear of like even logistically like getting out of a relationship like that. Yeah. We'll spend more time on that later. But for now, let's continue with the research. This one is pretty important. This 2004 study by Campbell et al. Examined the challenges faced by individuals in relationships with narcissists, including emotional abuse and manipulation. That's kind of what we were just talking about. Yeah.
So actually, that's something that I do want to dive in right now about is like that emotional abuse and manipulation, right? Is like being able to identify some of those red flags can be really crucial in even recognizing some of these patterns in our relationship. And again, since they all do fall on a spectrum, like you might find like less intense versions where you're like, oh, this is a nuisance in like this work relationship or with my parent, or, you know, it can go the other end of the spectrum too, where it feels much more severe in any of these relationships, right? So like these types of relationships can exist, you know, in a workplace environment, parent-child relationships, siblings, obviously intimate partners. So you can really start to see some of these patterns in any of those relationships. So with that being said, I did want to talk a little bit about some of those red flags. So you might start to see some gaslighting. I'm gonna run through some of these and then go a little deeper on some of them.
Okay, cool. Oh, no, that's all I was gonna say.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, like, baseline. Maybe we should define what gaslighting is. That's another one of those terms.
Gaslighting comes up a lot. Yeah. So, we'll just dive into the gaslighting.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. No, but yeah, gaslighting is one of it's a tool, right? It's a tool that a lot of people can use to manipulate, right? So gaslighting does come from that play, right? Where have you heard of that?
Does it come from a play? I did not.
Yeah. So
is this a Shakespeare thing?
I don't think it's Shakespeare.
Oh, okay.
But it comes from a play where essentially like one partner was messing with the other partner by like turning on the gas lights and
old
play. Okay. Yes. Yeah. So like essentially like having your partner like flicker the lights on and off or like move things around and you're like, what the heck? I thought I left this right here. Or like, I remember that this was like this. And so
like systematically making you think that you're forgetful or maybe you question your own memory or judgment.
Absolutely. And it is super effective.
You said that like a Pokemon move.
Pokemon's on the brain.
It was super effective.
But it was. I mean, like you would get like excellent across your screen.
You've not played Pokemon. Oh my God.
Clearly.
You were doing so well. Okay, let's go back to this sad subject.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no. It's very effective. Like if another example I could think of in the media is like the movie Amelie, you know, when she's messing with her neighbor who is kind of an abusive, I think, landlord. I can't totally remember, but she like goes into his apartment and changes the size of his slippers and like changes what's in his soap bottles and like a few hours or days, like this dude is very much questioning, his sense of reality and his mental health. And like, so it can be very, like I said, very effective in these relationships. Again, it's a tool that is often used by narcissists, but is not exclusive to narcissists, right?
Sure.
And so a good way to identify whether or not you're being gaslit, right, again, is if you do feel, and they call this like crazy making because it makes you feel crazy, you know, questioning your own reality. All of those things are also part of gaslighting, but also the idea of DARVO. So I'll go through DARVO. It stands for deny...
Accuse?
Yes. Deny, accuse, / attack.
Oh.
And then reverse victim offender. So deny, I didn't do that, right? Attack or accuse, you're misremembering. And then reverse victim offender, I'm just trying to help you out, you know? And so like it makes you think you're the and
sure.
So a lot of the times you'll find victims apologizing for having very valid feelings or very valid experiences, but because of this very effective manipulation, they're the ones left apologizing, and they left feeling like, what the heck just happened? Like I was just trying to voice how I was hurt, and now it's such a just disjointed feeling. So
quick note, if you're listening to this and you're having like a mini panic attack, just because somebody uses that argument technique, that does not necessarily mean they're a narcissist.
Or that they're intentionally manipulating
you. Sure, they could have learned that from a parent and not realized how damaging it is. Something like that. It's always best to communicate before you jump to that person's a narcissist.
Yes. I mean, and also I feel like that defensiveness is just so common in our like just common language of like, oh, well, I didn't mean to, or like, oh, I'm sorry you feel that way. Like all these kind of like little isms are just so common in our daily life that like I think we don't even recognize that we're doing it. So like I said earlier, like a lot of this can be unintentional, but I think it's still good to recognize them in case they are intentional.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, so that's
D.
Yeah, that is DARVO.
Oh, that's
and
DARVO.
That's just gaslighting.
Yeah.
We have let's see, like 6 other symptom or red flags to look at.
Let me let you run through.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna interrupt.
Another red flag is consistently moving the goalposts, right? So like if they wanted this, you do that, and then it's like suddenly not enough. Oh, and you didn't do this as well, or like, oh, I thought you were going to do this other thing, right? It's also very subtle. So moving the goalposts, weaponized therapy speak. This is a really good one. So this is for our modern people who are into therapy and have been to therapy and know the right things to say. They can start to use that as a form of manipulation, right? You're crossing my boundaries is something that you might hear, or I'm just expressing a need, you know? So we have to be very careful with that, because although those things are very true and are necessary to communicate, if done in certain settings, can often be manipulative.
Yeah, like if you're putting up a boundary to prevent somebody from like talking to you and yourself accepting responsibility for something, that's not an appropriate place to put a boundary necessarily.
Yes. I usually say that like a lot of the times if a partner is trying to say something that's on their mind or that's concerning to them, and then the other partner is like, well, you always do this, I'm like, okay, cool, that's valid. We can talk about that later. Right now we're focusing on this first thing, right? Because again, I don't want to invalidate anybody. And part of learning empathy is modeling empathy. And so you do also have to model empathy with narcissists. And I think that does help. So being able to give them the space to also voice their concerns in a structured setting, I think can be helpful. Only if, right, the victim has had that space as well. Okay. Another red flag is if your partner or this person is sharing alternate or revisionist histories, right? So like, oh, it didn't happen like that. I don't remember that. No, it was this that it happened. Or like, oh, you were drunk, you don't remember. Or, oh, you were postpartum, it was in a haze. You know, like all these things can be ways to revise your history and have you second guess your own reality. Guilt trips, bait and switch, faux apologies, right? So like apologizing but not really being sincere about it, or apologizing about how you feel versus about your actions and being accountable for what you've done. So I'm sorry you feel that way is a very common faux apology.
This is only slightly related, but I feel like a lot of these traits I see sort of on display on, we'll call it like trashy reality TV, like 100% of the time. And, you know what? It's making me think, hey, this is weird. Are the people on reality TV narcissists?
I mean, maybe, and like
that's weird.
But like also it just kind of, it says more about me, I think, since I love watching reality TV, and I always joke it's like drama I don't have to solve.
Yeah.
It's narcissists that I don't have to therapize. Like but yeah, I think that's a really very astute observation.
Thank you, Professor. Teacher's pet.
Yes. No, the last red flag is projection, right? So like whatever you might be feeling, you throwing it on the other person. Well, you're just angry, or like you're whatever.
You hear that a lot with like people who are like cheaters, who like accuse their significant other of like,
cheating.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And you're like, I would never think of cheating.
Yeah.
Like,
but that's making me think that you're thinking about it.
Absolutely. Okay. So that's a whole lot of red flags, right? And again, like keep in mind severity. How many of these red flags are you seeing? How often do they appear? And ultimately, what is the impact on the relationship, and what is the impact on you?
And asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. These red flags are not a diagnosis.
Not a diagnosis. But yeah, so the impact of a lot of this emotional abuse and manipulation might be the victim feeling increased depression and anxiety, potential feelings of self-doubt, lack of confidence, lack of self-esteem, sense of confusion, extreme stress, and again, really going to emphasize that feeling of self-doubt, right? So like trouble making decisions, trouble knowing what you need, trouble knowing what your reality is, what your experience is, what you're even feeling. That is a really, I would say, good indicator of being a victim of emotional abuse and manipulation, specifically, potentially gaslighting. Yeah.
Should we talk about maybe how to deal with these from like how to deal with relationships with narcissists, maybe from the other person's side? Like, what if you're in a relationship with a narcissist? What should you do to protect yourself?
Yeah. Obviously boundaries. I mean, I'm going to say that until I'm blue in the face, and it seems so silly, but like boundaries. But when I say boundaries, I mean much more internal emotional boundaries, right? Like, is this person a safe person to share something vulnerable with? Or is this person a safe person to be honest with, to share my needs with, you know?
Has this person ever used my hot goss as entertainment for my relatives?
That's a very good example. Yes, exactly. Exactly right.
Have you ever told your aunt a secret and she told your other aunt like immediately,
right,
and they're giggling about it?
Yeah. And like, I mean, I think about that, and I think immediately like the cultural perspective, because like Chisme is such a part of, like, for example, Latino culture, and like sharing your kids' information is very like culturally relevant. And even though that is a red flag, again, having that cultural relevance, I think, should also play a part, right? Because like, again, I
like that on its own does not, especially like if your culture is like, it has that as a part of it. Yeah. That's kind of like less of a big point in that.
Yes, exactly. Like I said, a lot of this is learned behavior. So if your culture is like this is a learned behavior in the culture, then like that's been normalized, right? It's not necessarily pathologized.
Right.
Okay.
Well put.
Thank you. I felt really good about that word too.
Yeah,
pathology. Oh. Okay. Another thing to keep in mind is being very firm in your own reality, right? As much as you're able to, right? So sticking to I statements is very, very helpful and useful. I know what I felt. I know what my experience is very helpful, right? You can't really go anywhere from that. Like that. Sticking to your reality is going to trip up the gaslighter or the manipulator or the narcissist or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, I feel like they prey on the fallibility of your memory. And the thing about memory is that it's like inherently very fallible. We're going to have a whole separate episode about memory because it's so fascinating. But basically, every time you remember an event, you're not remembering the event happening to you. You're remembering your previous memory of that event. So you're basically like you remember like something that happened 10 years ago. You're remembering like a chain of yourself remembering that event, and it could be totally different in like maybe subtle ways, but maybe in very, very serious ways. And if you've been like suggested that it's different in a certain way, you may remember it that way.
Like that one red flag, revising the history, right?
Oh my gosh. You know what I just thought of? Something that's totally relevant. Kathy Bates. There was this thing I saw on Instagram. I don't know how I'm going to share this with everybody, but she was on, what's the name of that show? Digging Up Your Roots, whatever it is, on PBS, where they basically, they take famous people and they do their genealogy. And they basically like, oh, you thought you were from here. You're actually from here, whatever. And they went through this thing with Kathy Bates, and the clip that they showed was like her talking about her mom, and how like, when she won the Oscar, she was like so ashamed that she forgot to thank her mother, because her mother was like, it's not so good. It's whatever. So you won, whatever. What's next? And then Kathy Bates is sitting there, she's like 75 years old, watching this video of her thanking her mother.
That's so interesting.
At the Oscar speech, and she's speechless. It's amazing.
So her memory was completely revised.
Yes. And if I remember correctly, the caption of the video was something like, "This is what happens when you grow up with a narcissist." Yeah.
You have that feeling of not being able to trust your own memory. It's so disorienting, and which is why it's such an effective tool in manipulation. We especially in parts talk, right? Like IFS speak, internal family systems.
Oh, yeah.
Like that sense of self is so important that if it's directly attacked, like I said, it can be very effective.
Yeah. It's foundational.
Absolutely. Something else to keep in mind is that like victims of gaslighting or narcissistic abuse, you might often find like defend their loved one or defend the person who is like directly impacting them. So like it might be hard to set up boundaries or to recognize that within your own self, because there is this desire to protect them, right? So like in that example with Kathy Bates, I'm sure that like she felt this sense of loyalty to her mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what she said? Actually, now that you bring that up, she said, it should have been her.
Yeah. So there is this like sense of protection and loyalty over your abuser, and I think that just speaks to that abusive relationship, and the cycle of that and that tie that connects the victim to their abuser. So, if you are experiencing that, or if any of this is hitting home, like be sure to go slow with yourself, seek help, bring someone that you do trust into this journey with you. Because it can be really confusing, and that is intentional. That is, again, one of the symptoms of it is intentionally to confuse you.
Yeah.
So one more thing I wanted to mention about narcissistic personality disorder. is that sometimes you might hear that it's like the male or the masculine version of borderline personality disorder.
I've never heard that.
Yeah. Sometimes you'll see that like, oh, because of how males have been socialized, it's been like you're more likely to be diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, and how females are socialized are more likely to be diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, but that they're very closely linked and this and that. And I think there is a lot of truth in that. Obviously, like it was something that was generally taught or talked about. But I do also think that like all diagnosis, all of these things are constructs, and we are all very much socialized in this way or another. But this is marking a pattern of behavior, whether it shows up in males and females, does not matter. A female can be absolutely a narcissist. A male can be a narcissist, and vice versa, right? Males and females can both be diagnosed with borderline personality disorder as well. And they're different diagnoses. Yeah. Like they do have different characteristics. So I did want to just put that out there just because I know that is also kind of a common thing that I've seen linked with talking about narcissistic personality disorder.
I want to say something, and you tell me if this is accurate. I would say with psychological disorders, more than anything, diagnoses are more like categorical labels for doctors.
Okay. Yes.
And insurance companies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, for example, like all of these things that are on gigantic spectrums that overlap with each other. I don't want to get too deep into it, but like how much ADHD overlaps with ASD, for example. These diagnoses are labels.
Yes. I actually have this conversation a lot with clients. The importance, or like my beliefs behind diagnosing, is that like I see the importance of it, but it really is just in like the quote unquote clinical realm.
Yeah, it's not like diagnosing a virus and then you get like a specific like, you know, medication to help you with it.
Yeah, or like you need to stay in quarantine, or like this can, yeah.
Like it's like a constellation of things that are like being pulled together under this one label that may or may not contain everything that is this experience. Yeah,
yeah. So like that's why I think, again, even just talking about diagnoses in general can be really important.
Yeah. Oh my God. We could spend a whole episode talking about that.
Because you're right. I mean, the purpose of diagnosing and the purpose of, for example, the DSM, which categorizes all the diagnoses, all the mental illnesses, is so that therapists and doctors can have this common speak, right? So instead of me coming up to a doctor and being like, hey, I have this patient, that is exhibiting anhedonia and insomnia and lack of motivation, like,
and without the DSM, the doctor says sounds like hysteria.
Right. Right. You could just be like, I have a client with depression.
Yeah.
And it kind of fast lines that communication. But like, yes, I mean, at the end of the day,
we all know that depression is different for everybody.
Nothing changes within you if you have a certain diagnosis or not. Like I went through this whole journey with a client trying to get them some validation of a certain diagnosis, and in the end of it, like not being diagnosed with that can be very like shattering. Like I have this conversation with clients of like there can be a lot of relief in receiving a diagnosis, but at the end of the day, like nothing changes. You know, like you are still the same person, and like I said, I'm not discounting the relief it provides. But like I said, it's only significant in having a name and having maybe a place to start in terms of suggestions, because like I could have a list of suggestions for how to manage or cope with depression, but every client is different. You know, like my recommendations for Sally are going to be different than for Sue, you know, like they're two different people. So they're just going to have two different treatment plans. So yeah, diagnosing, you'll hear, you have heard us talk a lot about diagnosing already, but I try to stay away from it. I again, see the importance of it, but
like to bring you, you know, behind the curtain, there, like for insurance billing, clients have to have a diagnosis to receive like insurance payment. So for that reason, it is important, but divorced from that reason, it's like exactly what you said.
Yeah. It's like it provides relief because you have a name to it and like a starting point. But like, aside from that, I'm going to take each person as they come. You know, I'm not going to treat every person with depression the same, or every client with ADHD the same. Absolutely not. I don't know how we got here from narcissism.
It was like a tangent off of a tangent.
But no, I love it.
Diagnoses, disorders.
It obviously is. Oh, because I was talking about BPD and NPD.
Them being like kind of sibling.
Related. Yeah, sibling diagnoses. But but anyway, yes, there is obviously lots of hope, lots of room for growth for both narcissists and victims.
You can't just say that. You got to build up to that.
Oh, sorry.
It's been so grim.
Well, I'm already there.
Let me get there. Okay, I'm there. Okay. I'm ready. I'm hopeful now.
It took you a second.
It did. I was so jarred.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, it's just because we were talking about like ways to overcome some of these obstacles, like using I statements. And,
that's true.
Yeah, and like coping, self-care, boundaries, seeking help.
Oh, have we talked about the fear of leaving?
No.
We did say we were going to come back to that.
Yeah, we're back.
Okay. I guess we just want to acknowledge that, just to put things in perspective of like, I know I was young once and I thought, why don't you just break up with somebody like that? And, it's truly not that simple, especially if it's like, if somebody is your partner, your lives are interwoven in so many multifaceted ways that like, you don't even really realize at the time.
Absolutely.
Like, for example, like if one of us was doing this to the other and the other person had to leave, I mean, it would involve like setting up like a clandestine bank account and like squirreling away a lot of money, like to safely leave. Like I'm thinking about like someone in my situation doesn't have any family around here. Like, you know, I don't know where I would go. Like, you know, you have to save up a lot of money to just not be in your house. Yeah. And like, if you're like a stay-at-home parent and your partner is the one who earns all the money, like that's...
What do you do?
Right. Yeah. Like you can't just break up with the person sometimes. Yeah. Which is so important why you need an ally.
Yeah. I mean, and that's just the logistical like side of it, because there are all the emotional ties too that are strengthened by the manipulation of the abuser. Sorry.
One sec.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were talking about
I'm going to repeat what I said.
Okay.
Yeah, I was saying that like that's just the logistical element or part of it. You know, there's the whole emotional side of it where like
you're questioning your very reality.
Or like even just the emotional ties to your abuser that were strengthened by the manipulation that they used. Like earlier when I mentioned like how they would defend their abuser and say like, they're not gaslighting me or like downplaying it because that's the point.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't mention it, but like, what if you got kids? Like,
yeah, I mean, that's why like a lot of this is just so generational too, right? Because like it's learned behavior. A lot of it stems from the parent-child relationship. And so much so that like you'll see clients that like don't even need to be by their abuser anymore to continue the abuse. Like they've adopted that sense of conversation and they do it themselves. Like I'll have lots of clients say to themselves like, oh, I'm an idiot, or I should have done this, or I'm not good enough, or like adopting and repeating a lot of the things that their abusers used to say, but like they don't live with them anymore, or they haven't seen them, or they're dead, and yet the abuse still continues. So,
or even like they won't say some stuff, like they'll keep their lips sealed about some stuff because they like as if like they'll get in trouble.
Absolutely. Oh, and that just goes right back to parts work, right? Like that feeling of like getting in trouble. Like kids feel like worry about getting in trouble. Yeah. You know, that's like
it's a very basic and foundational instinct.
Yeah, like a lot of the times. Really, that's what it is you see a lot of these adults just avoiding getting grounded, avoiding getting in trouble. And
just like keeping things status quo because at least you're surviving this way.
Yes. And that's something that I always say is that like maybe some things that helped you survive are getting in the way now. Yeah. You know, they're keeping you from the things that you want now. So that's why it's so important to do the work of reflecting and recognizing some of those things that are keeping you from the things that you want.
Mm-hmm. Should we wrap up?
That's all I had.
That's all I got. I mean, this was a long one. These episodes are getting longer, aren't they?
I don't know.
Maybe we'll cut enough out of this that it'll be normal sized.
I think it'll be normal size.
I think it'll be normal.
There's so much meat and potatoes in these, and that
I know. We went on so many tangents that could have been their own episodes. Honestly.
And I was thinking, there's so much more. There's literally so much more. But I hope that this was just a little stepping stone for y'all listening. To get you curious.
Yeah.
Get you curious. Do your own research, look up your own things, have some self-reflection. And I don't know. Let us know what you thought.
Yeah, we are curious to know what you think, always. Definitely leave a comment when we post the episode on Instagram. Mm-hmm. By the way, follow us at Vibe Therapy Services on Instagram to follow the podcast. That's basically the best way to get in touch with us. Is the
Instagram.
On Instagram and all that. What are we talking about next week, Joe?
I think we're talking about people pleasing.
Oh, that's excellent. We're really going in the dark side of romance this Valentine's month.
Maybe. Should we do something lighter?
No.
People want the juicy.
Yeah, they want Our dog is a menace right now.
He's a menace.
We should wrap up.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks so much for being here with us today. Happy Valentine's Day. I hope you had a wonderful one.
Yeah.
We love ya.
We love ya. You can be our Valentine, our purple Valentine. Is that a Elvis song? No, that's a different thing. Blue Valentine. And that's not Elvis. Doesn't matter. Remember to drink water, guys. Please.
Yeah. Drink some water for your purple friends.
Purple free.
Purple free. Bye.
Bye. Purple Friends is an independent podcast produced by Vibe Therapy Services and is not a substitute for a session with a real therapist. Our show art was created by Jocelyn Lang, and our theme music is Nature Nurture by The Implied Bear. Vibe Therapy is an Illinois-based private practice serving clients in person at our Wheaton office and virtually throughout the state of Illinois. We accept Blue Cross Blue Shield PPO, United Healthcare, Aetna, and Cigna Insurance. We also offer private pay rates as well as free 15-minute initial consultations. Therapy doesn't have to feel clinical. Visit vibetherapyservices.com to see if we vibe.